They needn't have worried. As he came down the steps, Khomeini brought 2,500 years of monarchy in Iran to an end.
خیابونا مثل اقیانوس اطلس که در طوفان باشه موج شرایطی بود که دیگه کاری نمی‌شد.
The man given the honor of driving Khomeini had taken on more than he bargained for.
بیش از اونی که فکر می‌کردیم آدم توی سالن اومد نتونستیم کنترل بکنیم. مردم ریختن ماشینای اسکورت و این بین ما و ماشینای اسکورت خارج شدن. و مرتب من حس می‌کردم که دارن روی این ماشین بالا پایین میپرن. از همون لحظه رانندگی عادی نبود. توی ماشین این شب تاریک میشد. امام هم اصرار داشتن که من در ماشین رو وا کنم. ایشون هیچ به در بر رفتن. من مونده بودم چیکار کنم.
Khomeini's people parted the crowd so a helicopter could come and rescue him from his own followers.
همچی که امام رفت تو هلیکوپتر من دیگه نفهمیدم. من دولت تعیین میکنم. من به پشتیبان این ملت دولت تعیین میکنم. من تو دهن این دولت میزنم.
The revolutionaries now attacked police stations and military bases. Each time they captured one, they seized more weapons. After 10 days, the beleaguered military chiefs met.
همه این وضعیت خراب رو تشریح کردن. هر کسی چیکار کرده؟ مثلا فرمانده نیرو هوایی گفت که از رو سقف ادارهش اومده بیرون با هلیکوپتر برای اینکه تمام جاهای دیگه همطور ریختن مردم.
They argued through the night.
به تیمسار حاتم پیشنهاد شد که بردارن یه چیزی بنویسه که ارتش بی‌طرف بمونه. شاید بی‌طرفی ارتش باعث بشه که دیگه این سر و صدا و اینا به صورت بدتری که باعث جنگ داخلی و تقسیم مملکت اینا بشه نشه. دیگه کم کم همه تایید کردن، بعدش هم همه امضا کردن.
Next morning, one of Khomeini's lieutenants took a phone call.
و وقتی تلفن رو قطع کرد گفتش که ارتش اطلاعیه داده که در دعوای بین مردم و حکومت بی‌طرف خواهد بود و دستور داده شده که نیروها به پادگانها برگردند. این به معنی پیروزی انقلاب بود. همه هورا کشیدیم، شادی کردیم و تبریک گفتیم، بغل کردیم همدیگر رو.
So I ended the last video right here. Just to mention a few other things. I think I talked about OPEC last time, the oil embargo of 1973. They did this again in the later 70s. This was, again, a tactic because they knew that Western countries were dependent on oil and oil prices being stabilized. And that's really what I'm talking about in the last point with the military and oil interests being mixed together. And this is very significant for the past 40 to 50 years of history in my lifetime anyway. And still very significant, as you know, from following things in the Middle East if you follow any of them the past 20 years, in fact. So it's very significant to know that the United States in the 80s begins coming a lot closer to Saudi Arabia, and one of the points of this is to stabilize these oil prices. So, for instance, the United States will sell military equipment to Saudi Arabia, and we're going to see later the United States will stick up for Saudi Arabia in certain circumstances. So that's what I wanted you to see there. So let's go to what the video there was talking about. Here is a picture from the United States in the 1970s showing you what happened during the oil embargo. If you talk to some people who might be a little bit older than you that were driving in the 1970s, they might remember some of these circumstances where there was actual gas shortages and you had to wait in line to get gas or You just couldn't get gas for a while. So, what we were just seeing the video about was the Iranian Revolution. The man who had been the leader of Iran, the king or ruler of Iran, was a man named Mohammad Reza. Shah is the title. Okay, so you see that name, Mohammad Reza Shah. Shah means king. It's an ancient Persian word for king. So he was the king of Iran, and he became king in 1941 when his father was deposed at the beginning of World War II. And he was a very close ally of the United States and Great Britain, or the United Kingdom, right? And the United States, for instance, helped him finance a very large military force in Iran. And this is all connected to the Cold War, too. Remember the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States wanted to maintain allies everywhere to offset the Soviets. Iran, remember, bordered on the Soviet Union. That's important to remember. And one of the points of having the Shah as an ally was to make sure the Soviets had a border, had a country that was an ally of the United States. Also, Iran could produce a lot of oil. So like Saudi Arabia, Iran was another very important monarchy that produced a lot of oil. However, in Iran, you had a very large groups dissenting against the Shah's rule by the 1970s. There had always been some dissent, and I'd have to go into more history of Iran to go into that for this class, but just so you know, there had always been some dissent, but meaning there were people who didn't like the Shah or wanted something different. And Iran's a special, interesting place, and there are different factions and groups. But what happened in the mid-70s, from really 75 to 78, 79, was a lot of these groups got together in their opposition to the Shah. That included a lot of younger people who were college students. Some of them wanted a more liberal democratic government. The Shah's government was oppressive in many ways, although the Shah allowed Western-style dress. There was alcoholic beverages were allowed. There were music and those kind of things under the Shah. It also was a very repressive regime in many ways. So there were those who wanted that. There were also others who were very religious, and they followed the Iranian Shia or Shiite tradition. Just so you know, in Iran, the primary form of Islam is the Shia or Shiite tradition. And the man known as Khomeini there, that was the older man with the beard in the video we saw, his title was Ayatollah. Ayatollah is a title. And he was a religious leader of a Shiite religious faction, Shia or Shiite Iranian religious faction. And he was a political opponent of the Shah. Because Khomeini believed that Iran should be a Shia Muslim Islamic state. Okay, Islamic Republic, and that the Shah was an evil man who ruled as a puppet of the West. And this appealed to a lot of people. And Khomeini had actually been in exile. In that video, he's returning from France after the Shah is essentially forced to leave the country because there is so much disarray and things going on in the country, chaos, riots, that the Shah flees the country. So Khomeini returns, as you saw in the video, and he's welcomed. And he is able to establish the Islamic Republic, okay? So he forms the Islamic Republic in 1979. The revolutionary period continues for about 2 or 3 more years. But this is the government that's formed in Iran, and it is the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that still exists in Iran. It is a republic. There are elections. But the religious leaders, known as the Ayatollahs, have a huge influence on what happens there. So it has a lot of strict rules when it comes to certain things in Islamic law. All right? So this is the origin of that republic. Here is the photograph of him returning to France in February. I think it was February 1st, if I remember the date correctly, in 1979. And as we saw, he's welcomed back, and he basically takes over the country at that point. Now, something else that happened that was very interesting, that was very important to world politics is something was the Iranian hostage crisis. Remember, the United States government had been very friendly to the Shah. The CIA had backed up the Shah. The United States had sold a lot of military equipment to the Shah. And the new Iranian regime hated the United States. They hated two countries particularly, Israel and the United States. They saw both of those as evil and the great purveyors of evil in the Middle East. Okay, so in this hostage crisis started on November the 4th in 1979. So you still had the U.S. embassy there in Tehran, the capital of Iran. And basically this whole group of revolutionary students took over the U.S. embassy. And there were only about 50 or so, I think. I think I have the number here. Let me see. Yeah, 50 or so hostages taken, because that's all that was left in the embassy. A lot of people, the State Department and the United States government had called a lot of these people home because of what was going on in Iran. Were some of those people CIA agents? Most likely, yes. I mean, that's the way it works. But these people were taken hostage, and they were kept hostage, as you see, for quite a long time, over a year. I remember when I was a kid on the nightly news, there would be a thing on the news every night like hostage day, whatever. Like the hostages have been held for 100 days, or it got up to 200, whatever it was. I remember this when I was a kid. And it played actually a very pivotal role in the 1980 election in between Jimmy Carter, the incumbent president, and Ronald Reagan. Okay, we talked about Reagan a little bit before, and I mentioned Carter maybe. Jimmy Carter was president from 77 to 81. And in fact, the day they released the hostages, on this date right here, was the day of Ronald Reagan's inauguration. Okay, so it was a very significant event, and this event has played a big role in world politics since almost the past 40 years, right? Because the Iran and the United States have pretty much been at odds ever since then, right? And this plays a role still in the Middle East, because this is why United States and the Saudi Arabia tend to be closer, because Saudi Arabia and Iran are now have been at odds with each other. They're opponents. Okay, just so you can see on the map here again. Here's Saudi Arabia. Here's Iran. By the way, there's Iraq. There's Syria, Egypt. Notice Israel, West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon. Okay, just so you see them all again. This is a cool little map because it kind of gives you an idea of how big they are. So here's the continental United States. So you could fit all of these into basically the continental United States. Just